Many of you have heard of furries before, but can you be a Christian and a furry? And if you are, what is that like? We've been seeing a lot of that online lately, and that's what we're talking about on today's episode of the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name is Derek.
And my name is Ethan, and make sure to go check us out on social media, mainly on Instagram. We post the most on YouTube and Spotify as well, along with the other, podcast platforms. So go check us out there. And if you're not subscribed to YouTube, go subscribe to YouTube. We're just past 800, trying to get to 1,000 by the end of the year, which theoretically, as far as YouTube marketing goes, shouldn't be that hard, but we need your help doing it. So subscribe and stick around, and we got great episodes coming your way. So, Derry, ready to get into it?
Yeah, so today we have a special guest named Soul who's coming on. We interacted with him on Instagram a little bit. He's got a great account. He is a Christian and someone that's interested in the world of furries and stuff like that. And so we wanted to get his expert opinion today on everything in this topic. So we're going to have a great conversation. Soul, anything that you want to say about yourself to intro? Maybe how long you've been a furry, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like they said, my name is Soul. I'm a musician primarily. I have both my bachelor's and my master's in music. And I'm looking to get into the worship music sphere in the church. And like I said, I am also, very interested in this aspect of furries and anthro animals. I have been endeavoring into this ever since I'm gonna say the later half of 2023, going into 2024. Is when I really started getting into this. And then I launched a Discord server in 2024. And it's been steadily growing. And I have just been mostly seeking to glorify God through this hobby and to bring the gospel and to bring theology and stuff into this very niche section of culture that not a lot of people engage with.
I'd love to hear your background a little bit of maybe how long you've been a Christian for, what kind of denomination you're a part of, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, I grew up in a Christian house. I've been a believer since I'm gonna say I was about like 10ish. I remember I had a big experience when I was 10 where I was very heavily convicted for my sin. And God saved me. And then a few years later I got baptized. And now I've just been striving to follow Christ throughout my entire life. In terms of denominations, I'm a Reformed Baptist. So for most of my life, I grew up Standard Baptist, but then actually in the last year, I met a lot of Christian furry friends that I have who are surprisingly also Reformed Baptists. There's a surprising amount of Christian furries out there who are Reformed Baptist, which is crazy. And they were, and when I heard them explain it to me, I was like, oh hey, like at first I was like, but then I was like, oh, this makes sense and stuff. And so that's where I'm at now in terms of my in terms of my denomination and stuff. And I've been striving to follow Christ throughout my life. It's been rough, but a couple of years ago I had a bit of a wake up call to where basically it's like, okay, you gotta you need to get back into following Christ and stuff. You need to be doing that more, because I used to fall asleep at pretty much every sermon that I would listen to. My parents would have to constantly wake me up, and yeah, I was doing that. I wasn't reading my Bible. I wasn't
You need to go to a
really
Pentecostal church.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I was doing that. I wasn't reading my Bible. I wasn't engaging with the word a lot. And ever since a couple of years ago, I've actually been listening to sermons. I've been reading my Bible more, taking notes, and really diving deep into this realm of worship music, which has been awesome.
That's awesome. Wow. I love to hear your background. Just for everyone to know. Did you see a couple weeks ago there was a reel and a TikTok going viral of a whole bunch of Mormon furries? Do you see that at all?
I did not actually.
Whoa.
That's interesting.
It's really interesting to me, the intersection between different faiths and the furry communities. There was a whole Mormon furry convention that happened a little bit ago. I'm not sure when, but it went viral a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. So it's interesting that you say that there's also like a Reformed Baptist kind of group of furries as well. That's just so
Mm-hmm.
fascinating to me, like how those groups form.
Yeah, like the majority of the friends that I've made in the furry fandom are Reformed Baptist, although there's some like
Hmm.
the three most common that I see are Reformed Baptist, non-denominational, or Pentecostal. It's typically
Sure.
one of those. There's the occasional, it's like you have some Orthodox, some
Hmm.
I think one of my I definitely know there is a probably the most popular Christian furry out there right now is her name is Azira, and I know her. I've talked to her, and
Hmm.
she is an Anglican. So
Oh,
Wow.
dope.
yeah.
I don't know why that makes sense.
Derry and I are we are appreciators of Anglicanism. We haven't converted, but we've talked about it a lot.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
True.
Going to
Wow.
an Anglican church
So,
this Sunday.
Ooh.
ooh. Um, so you talked about being a Christian. How did you become interested in being a furry? What does that mean to you? Maybe you can answer those questions for us, for the listener.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a bit of a long story. So it's a bit weird because I was one of those kids, and I'm sure that many people can relate to this. I was one of those kids that was terrified of mascots.
Mm.
I was scared to death. I think probably the scariest experience that I had a child. It wasn't like, like going on some big scary roller coaster or going on to a haunted house, even though those probably would have scared me. No, that was the scariest experience for me as a child. Probably my scariest experience as a child was going to a hockey game where it was mascot appreciation night. And there were about 10 of them lining the hallway as you went into the arena. And so I was so scared going in. And I remember just like watching the hockey game, and I would have one eye on the game, the other eye on the stands, just to see where they were walking around and stuff. Um but as I grew to like learn more about this stuff, I was like, wow, this aspect of like mascots and stuff is really cool. Like I love the costumes, I love the appeal of it all. And then I think one day when I was younger, I saw like someone doing like it was basically like a fursuit suit up, which is basically you're putting on the whole suit and stuff. And I was like, oh wow, like people people actually do whole they make custom mascots basically. And I was like,
Hmm.
wow, that is so cool. And admittedly, I sort of disassociated with that for a long time. I just kind of like left it on the back burner and stuff, and I had my struggles relating to that. Um but then I remember a couple years ago I came back, and I was like, okay, I want to sort of explore this thing again, see what I can get out of it. And I remember watching a video. It was like a news some sort of news thing talking about furries. And I think the thing that sort of got me to think like, okay, I want to do this actually was when they were talking to a furry, and they were like, so my costume, if you see me in my costume, if you see me in my fursuit, then that's a better representation of who I am than if you met me for real. And he almost like this idea of like this is like more my identity than like me. And I remember just like pausing the video, and I was like, is that like the best thing? And I was like, okay, like I sort of want to do this to sort of see what the intersection could be between these things, because to me, um the way I saw it, it was never about or at least to me, the core of fursuiting is performance, is acting.
Hmm.
So I always compare it to like the people that do um the stuff at Disneyland, who dress up as Mickey and Minnie and Pluto and
Sure.
all that stuff. I've always seen it in that light, and I was like, okay, let me see if I can, explore it in this light, get into it. This is something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to explore into it. And so I think that year I commissioned a friend to basically make a design for me. And it was so how things worked out is I actually ended up breaking that artist's terms of service a couple of times, and that was my bad. To the point where the artist was like, she basically gave me like basically a coloring page, and she was like, do what you want with this. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, fine. And then I basically filled in like, and I came up with this design right here. So these like the colors are my ideas. And so then I went about that. Um and then a few years after, not a few years, the few months after that, I looked at what is it? I got someone to make this into a fursuit. And the really good thing that I'm happy about, like I'm happy that my fursuit it's actually made by a Christian too, which is awesome.
Hmm. Wow, that's pretty cool. And so, how would you say like you've has it evolved your like interest in furries since you began to now? What has that been
Oh
like
yeah.
for you? Like, have you
Oh yeah.
has there
It
been pushback? Have you become more interested in it?
there's definitely been pushback. The pushback has mostly been mostly online cuz
Mm,
what is it? I made a video once that went pretty viral and stuff, and
mm,
most of the pushback I've gotten has been online saying like, like how can you do these two things? But a lot of like, one of the first people that I actually went to about this was my pastor,
mm,
and I talked to him about it, and I was like, "Hey, I'm interested in this. Is this a good idea?" Basically, and like his response was basically, like, "Yeah, you could do it, but you have to be careful, right? You have to be
mm,
careful with what you engage with, what you do." Um, but it was also really funny, that conversation. I remember, he was like, "So, if you're like doing this furry stuff, what's like the animal that you chose?" And I was like, "So, like the fursono, as we call it, mine's a deer, like a reindeer." And he was like, "Well, why did you choose a reindeer?" And I was like, "Well, partially because I'm easily skittish and I tend to get freaked out easily." And he's like, "Yeah, that checks out."
mm,
So that was one of the funny things. And it's like most like I've talked to my friends about it and stuff too. And I have friends that are pretty supportive of it.
mm.
Um, like I said, the pushback has mostly been online, mostly from just random Instagram comments that'll tell me like, "Well, how can you do this?" or "This verse in this verse says blah blah blah."
Mm.
There's no verse that says thou shalt not dress up in furry personas.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But a lot of people so I think for instance, a lot of people will point to verses regarding like sexual immorality, or
Mm,
they'll point to like verses talking about, like bestiality or something like
sure.
that. Um,
Yeah,
and
you
that's
guys aren't
most
doing bestiality. It's
no,
like you're like, I
no.
agree with that verse. We
Yeah,
should
no,
obey that
yeah, no,
verse.
like yeah, no, we agree. I think like because the number one source of pushback that we or that I see a lot of Christian furries get is that people will say, "Oh, well, don't you know that God made you a human and not an animal? So why are you identifying as an animal?" And
Mm,
I just go, "Well, like, yes and amen to that." Like, I'm glad that I'm a human and I don't
mm,
identify as an animal. It's just a fun way for me to sort of express myself and a fun way for me
mm,
to do this. Because alongside me wanting to, like go out and spread the gospel to people, like I just find it really fun. Like I can just how I phrase it is like I can just like basically be like a Disneyland mascot anytime I
mm,
want, which is
sure.
like who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I guess you could probably say to those people who are saying those things, like, yeah, when you dress up on Halloween as an alien, like you're not identifying, you don't think you're an alien. Like
No,
you just like to dress up as the character. And like you said, this is mostly for acting for you, right?
exactly, right? And it's like a form of cosplay. At
Mm,
least to me, it's like a form
makes a
of
lot of sense.
cosplay. Yeah, except it's not me cosplaying as like a character that already exists. It's me cosplaying as a character
Mm,
that I made myself, which I think
gotcha.
is it makes it a little bit more personal, at least to me.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, one
You
question that
said,
comes to mind. Oh, dear, is that okay if I ask?
yeah.
Okay. Um, one question that comes to mind is you. So you just mentioned like it's something that people. I guess the question I'm wondering is like the distinction of people don't identify as like the alien they dress up on as Halloween, right? Everyone would agree.
Mhm.
Furries don't identify as deer or cats or wolves or whatever. But what do you think the reason is for having even the term of furry to say like you like dressing up and you feel comfortable in this costume? Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think like well, I think I guess because like the term furry is like I mean that's an interesting question because like I guess this isn't entirely related, but like there are some people that have like personas per se that aren't even like furred. Like I've seen
Hmm.
lizard costumes, for instance, and those animals don't have fur. There are plenty of dragons out there. Dragons don't have fur.
Hmm.
But I think it's like because furry it's mostly focusing on this aspect of like anthropomorphic animals, right? So animals that have human characteristics and stuff. And so I guess like when people say, because the thing about being a actually one thing I did want to mention is that not all furries have like these. Like it's
Hmm.
actually it's a very I think last I checked, the percentage of like people who say that they're furries that actually have one of these is about I think 15% or something like
Wow.
that. So like yeah, not a lot of people who identify or who say they're furries actually have this, and they even I think only about 50% of furries actually say that they would want one, that they have the desire for one. So a lot of people who are saying that they're furries simply say that they're furries in the sense of I like media with anthropomorphic animals. So
Hmm.
like Lion King, Lion King, Zootopia, those are two that come to mind.
Hmm.
Uh Bad Guys is also one that comes to mind. I'm sure there's plenty of others, but
Tons.
b-
Yeah.
yeah. But basically this idea of like animals in media. And I actually do remember as a kid also when I was watching shows growing up, my favorite characters were always the animals. I
Hmm.
I don't know why. It's just that was just a consistent pattern for me. And I think
Yeah.
like when where people are saying like like I'm a furry or whatever, it's just this it's simply this appreciation of the idea of anthropomorphic animals in general.
Hmm.
Do you think it's a more of an like it has a more appreciation for anthropomorphic animals than the average person? Because I like Over the Hedge. I think that's a great movie that's underrated. No one talks about it enough. I
Mhm.
should go back and watch it because I
Classic.
remember really liking it. Kung Fu Panda, massive fan. Getting my wife to watch him because she hasn't. Right, so
Yep.
I like it, but I've never thought like, oh, does that mean I'm a furry? And so I guess my question is kind of circling the idea of like what does it mean to be a furry or define yourself as a furry? And yeah, it's just interesting the identity of like a furry being a thing more than just it seems like a hobby, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, and like I get it because even within like the furry communities, there's a lot of like jokes that people will make. They'll be like, "Oh, you like and like I'm just paraphrasing here, but they like, "Oh, you like Kung Fu Panda or Over the Hedge. Therefore, you must be a furry." And like
Hmm.
it goes beyond like just liking this stuff, right? Because like you said, I love Kung Fu Panda. I love Over the Hedge. I think they're great movies. But I think this aspect of being a furry specifically involves having an appreciation for the fact that they're animals. And for me at least, like I can't speak for like everyone else, but I can say for me at least, it is an appreciation of anthropomorphic animals and their use in storytelling. And I think um probably like the reason why I would say I'm interested in this is because when I see like like media with animals and stuff, I'm like, okay, like this character is this species. What does that mean for the overall plot? I look at Narnia for instance. Narnia, you have what two of the main characters are the beavers. And the beavers are animals that are symbolic of, hard work, diligence, and stuff like that. And so that's why that's why, like they're placed with the Pevensies, they're heroes. Then in the movie adaptation of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you have later on they meet a fox who helps them
Mm.
escape the clutches of who helps them escape the White Witch. And what's interesting to me is that they sort of use the idea of a fox to the narrative's advantage. Because typically foxes in medias are like, like the sly, the sneaky guys. Like, you can't trust them, right? And
Mm.
so I think it's interesting because it's like you have the movie where the beavers are initially very, very apprehensive about the fox helping them and they're like, like you look like one of the bad guys. And then the fox responds with, like that's just an unfortunate family resemblance. Like talking about the fact that, it's like, hey, like, foxes are typically known for this sort of stuff, but I want to help you guys. And so it's used to the advantage of the narrative to basically say like, oh hey, like this guy isn't, looking to hand them over to the White Witch. He's looking to help them. And then obviously you have, like the wolves, almost all like the bad animals in that sense are like wolves who are, you know, um, hunting the Pevensies in that sense. And so I guess like what I mean, it's like when someone is like a furry, is that they have an appreciation for like the qualities that animals produce and how that can translate in the context of a story and even just in one's own like personality. Like I think of one of my friends. So I've met one of my best friends through this. And he is so like he's also a Reformed Baptist, and he is one of the smartest theological guys that I've ever met.
Hmm.
You can talk to him about pretty much any theological conversation, and he'll probably yap on for like 15 to 20 minutes about it. Like he knows
Sure.
a lot. But he is also one of the most furry guys I have ever met.
Hmm.
And I say that because he will constantly make jokes about how similar he is to like because he has a persona. He'll make jokes about like how similar he is to his persona. When he's talking and stuff, he'll use like these like stickers and stuff of his persona that are really well made and stuff. And he will like a lot of the time he'll talk about how similar like he is personality wise to his persona. So like he is I believe his persona is a mix of a border collie and an Australian shepherd, as far as I
Hmm.
know. And so
Hmm.
he'll constantly talk about, like, oh, really, really similar to that, in that sense and stuff. And we'll make jokes about it too and stuff. And I
Hmm.
think that like part of the appeal of like being a furry is having like, like a persona, that thing
Hmm.
that you make, because it is it's supposed to be a representation of yourself basically. And so it's like
Hmm.
a lot of time it's basically like, like if I was an animal, like you probably were asked like a kid a lot, it's like if I was an animal, what would I be, right?
Sure.
Hmm.
More as an adult, actually, but yeah, as a kid too.
I
Fair.
would. Yeah. What animal do you want to be? I'd
Yeah,
probably say shark.
that's a
Ooh,
crazy answer.
that's interesting. There aren't a lot of like aquatic personas out there, so that's interesting.
I just want to attack
Hmm.
Derry, and he can't stop me. Derry snorkels. Used to when we lived in Hawaii.
Still
Yeah.
can.
No, you can't. Not allowed. Okay, so you mentioned your friend's fursona,
Yeah.
and him feeling like, oh yeah, his. I feel like there's so many similarities between me and my fursona. That
Hmm.
sparks an interesting conversation of what is like the distinction between the person and their fursona. Is it
Hmm.
Love
a
it. Yeah.
different identity or what's going on there?
Yeah. And so like again, like that was the thing that really got me into this, right? And so like I do appreciate questions like that, because it's like, we do have to distinguish between, like, is it an identity or not and stuff. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
like for him and for me also, it's just like like it's similar to like if we were, like role playing on like the playground in grade 1 or something like that. And so it's like it's not that we identify as these guys in the sense that, like if you know them, if you know like our persona, like us better. Like no, this is just a character that we put on
Mm.
the same way that an actor would. And I also think it's worth noting that, like, there are a lot of characters in media who are very closely based on, like people, right? Like take Luke Skywalker, for instance, who is very heavily based on George Lucas himself. And so you have this idea of, it's like having a character and stuff that's based off of you, or maybe even like is very, very similar to you in a lot of ways. Like again, like bringing up my friend, for instance, like as I'm recording this right now, he doesn't have one of these, and I'm not saying that like an insult or anything, because frankly they are very
Loser.
expensive.
He's got to get
They-
he's got to get a suit.
oh no, I've been trying to convince him for a long time now. Um, but like, we talk about it a lot, and he's like, if I had a suit, I would literally just like be the same person that I am right now.
Mm,
Because, it's like because like for him, like his persona is literally just, what if I was an animal? And that's it. And
mm,
it can depend, actually, because like one of the things that actually I personally use to sort of separate this idea of like my persona being my identity is
mm,
giving my persona character quirks. So one of the big character quirks of my persona actually is that he is terrified of dragons. I
mm,
love dragons myself. I think they're a really cool thing, but he is terrified of them. And
mm,
so it's really funny to have this character where it's like, oh yeah, it's me, so I could just be me and I could just do this stuff. But it's also fun to have this character quirk to where it's like, oh no, he sees a dragon, he's probably gonna go like run and hide or something like
mm,
that.
Hmm.
And so not only is that fun for me, but it helps me with this idea of, okay, like this isn't my identity. I'm not identifying as this. I'm not saying, it's like I'm not saying like this represents more of who I am than my human self. This is just a character
mm,
I play.
mm,
Yeah. So it seems like, from what I'm gathering, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like it's a fun hobby where you're like, oh, I like to be creative. I like the suit that I made. In this suit has a character, so I'm entering into that character space and I'm going to act as that character. And it sounds like for you at least, it's just all fun. Like it's just like a
Mhm.
fun thing to do that is enjoyable, passes the time. Almost like if someone was like into theater and they always were in community theater plays because they liked the acting aspect, but you just do it in a more casual way throughout the year.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like I wear this thing like all the time. Like I'm not just gonna like go out into a restaurant and wear this thing because like, quite frankly it's also very hot and very
mm,
exhausting. Um but it's like it's just fun, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
fun to go and like be this character and stuff, and to just essentially like perform. And it's also for me personally, like I've always loved like drama stuff and wanted to do that, but I also struggle quite a bit with emotions and emoting my voice, and also with acting just in general, or like at least physical acting. So with this, where you have like a mascot suit where, most of the time mascots don't talk. So I can sort of, portray this thing. I have this, outlet where I can do acting and stuff in a way that works for me, because it's almost all silent. A lot of it is done through gestures and stuff like mascots would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
hmm.
interesting.
Cool. You said and mentioned, actually, first, I really like the description you gave of like it's acting, and then you described different characters like George Lucas who puts himself as he's writing into a character, and that's how you like kind of view your persona. So it's not like this is a truer sense of who I am, but this is a means for me to like almost project art in a way where it's
Mhm.
not taking over who you are, your identity. Although I'm sure some people could do that, but for you, like
Oh
this
yeah.
is the healthy version of uh, this pastime, this hobby. Makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
You said when you're talking to your pastor that he mentioned there's some like bad areas that this could go to, or there's
Yes.
some things to watch out for. Could you describe some of those for people that are interested in this or are worried about it?
Yes. So one thing I always talk to people about, a lot of people will ask me, is it okay to be a Christian and a furry? And I will say that depends. Like that's
Mm,
not a I'm not gonna give a straight yes or no answer to that because I think that if you do want to be a Christian and a furry, like you can, but you also have to have a lot of discernment.
mm,
The first obviously is this area of identity. It's like even because you guys talked a lot about Therians and how
mm,
like Therians who literally like they will spiritually identify as
mm,
something non-human and stuff. And
mm,
like that is not biblical because the Bible
mm,
tells us that our identity is in Christ and that we are made in the image of God. And so we need to be grounded in that identity and stuff. And there are even furries who will say that like my persona is a truer sense of me than myself. There are some furries
mm,
that will like they'll say they'll use it as a sense of like escapism, where it's
mm,
like I don't like the way that I am, and so if I'm just this big dog or whatever, that and I could just basically be whatever I want to be. And I think
mm,
that is a very key area to like avoid as a Christian, because
mm,
we have to understand our identity is in Christ. It's not in it's not in anything else, right?
mm,
It is fully in Christ. It is rooted in Christ. And so that's the main thing that I tell people. It's like, if you're gonna do this, like, don't do it because you want, like, don't do it for the sense of like escapism. Don't do it because you for the sense of identity, whatever and stuff. Like, just do it because it's fun. Just do it because
mm,
it's a hobby. And it's like, also the other thing to talk about is that like there is a like sexual element, or not,
mhm,
like, not embedded into it. But so
mm,
I remember I went to Anthrocon recently, which is the biggest furry convention out there. I think there were almost 20,000 people there this year, so
wow.
pretty big. Yeah, pretty big. um, and I remember, so there's a spot at Anthrocon called the Dealer's Den, which is basically you can go in and buy artwork and stuff. And I think, like, also one of the reasons why I say that discernment is needed is because I remember me and my friend, we were going in, like, we're older guys. We know what to see and like what to avoid and stuff. And
Mm,
we saw some stuff and we were like, yeah, some of this could probably go in the 18 plus area. Like,
mm,
and so um when you engage with this stuff, you have to what is it? You have to know where the Bible stands on this and stuff,
mm,
and where the Bible is clear. There is, like, there is an aspect of, it's like some furries engage in, like, like, not safe for work things. And I've talked a
mm,
lot about on my channel how if you're a furry or not, like, you cannot engage in that stuff as a Christian, because the
mm,
Bible is very clear on sexual immorality and
mm,
identity and all this stuff. And so if you are going to be like, that's the thing that, like, my pastor said, right? If you are going to do it, it cannot be about identity. It cannot be about this sense of like, oh well, this is a better, truer sense of me, because the Bible teaches us that our truest sense of identity itself, when we're Christian, our identity is in Christ and his righteousness
mm,
becomes ours. And so that's why I say, it's like, I'd rather people know, like, first things first, I want people to know that I'm a Christian, and a furry second,
mm,
because um being Christian is the most important part of my identity. In fact, it's my whole identity.
yeah.
People, even just like normal people, like something like last, it's like, well, it's like you make Jesus your whole personality, and I'm like, that's kind of the point.
Hmm.
So
Amen.
I love it.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. There, go for it.
You were talking about how there are parts of the furry community that can be 18 plus and could be like troublesome, I guess. Do you think that the like at the bedrock of what it is to be a furry um is like there is a sexual nature to it? 'Cause I think a lot of people when they see furries and stuff like that, their mind just immediately goes to some kind of lewd behavior. And we talked in our first podcast about a lot of like different abuse and even like pedophilia and stuff that can go on
Yes.
because of like the interaction of like older people with younger people within the community and the sexual nature of it. In my opinion, I think even if it was inherently uh, sexual because of our culture, like to be a furry at all, I think it could be something Christians could take back. That's just my perspective, or not even take back,
Mhm.
but like could change for the glory of God. Because everything that's, I think, like art like that can be given for the glory of God. And so even if right now it is inherently sexual, I think it could be changed. But that's my question to you. Do you think that like at the base of what it is to be a furry, that there's evil or perversion there, or that it's just a neutral thing that can be perverted?
Right. I think that like I've always been of the opinion that I don't think in essence I don't think it is a sexually perverse thing. I think it
Mm,
is just like again for me, it's always been this aspect of performance and performing as a character and acting all of that
mm,
stuff out. And so I think that yes, absolutely. I think that the sort of unfortunate thing is that it is known for being like a sexually perverse thing and it can absolutely happen 100%, but I don't think that is sort of all encompassing of what sort of like being a furry is. And I do agree that like even if it was like even if it was inherently like a sexual thing, I think that it can be something that is like used for the glory of God and stuff. In fact, like even one area that I'm trying to like talk about this a lot is that I feel like in the furry community right now there is a lot less of a focus on sort of character acting, and there's a lot more of a focus on, well, this fursuit looks really good because it has this feature and this thing and this thing and this thing.
mm,
And it becomes a lot more about, well, how good does this fursuit look and how good does it look, rather than the sort of like the person behind it doing stuff, right?
mm,
One of my favorite sort of furries to look at for inspiration is a furry what is it? So her character was called Telephone, and she is a so it's a completely unique species actually to the furry fandom. They're called Dutch angel dragons or Dutchies.
mm,
And what she did is she had a I think it's like some sort of like whistle thing that she would wear in her mouth basically while she was performing. And so um she would she would use the whistle to basically make it seem like she was this sort of like alien dragon type thing that was just trying to communicate with other people. And so you have
mm,
almost this like you have this sort of performance type thing where it's like, oh, you have this like big like alien dragon basically that just comes and is coming to like do stuff with people. And it's basically this whole basically whenever you see her and stuff, she's always in character, right? She's
mm,
always performing. And so that has always been a big source of inspiration for me when I think about, it's like, okay, how would I perform in this sense, right? Because and it's like with any sort of acting, it's like there's this sense of and like I guess like going back to the identity thing, like it's a fine line because with any sort of acting, there will be this sense of losing yourself because you
mm,
need to if you want to be a good actor, you have to lose yourself in a sense to play a role so that you can play that role effectively. But you
for
don't
sure.
want to lose so much of yourself that it becomes all encompassing.
Mm, makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense.
kind of like Heath Ledger, how he went too far into the Joker and actually lost himself. Unfortunately, R.I.P. One of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about this idea of can Christians be furries and the kind of foreseeable like problems of identity, as well as what was the second thing you mentioned, like identity, but also escapism, finding comfort in it too much. I think you're spot on. That would be probably be my biggest concern is like, are
Mhm.
you too focused on being a furry that you're not focusing enough on being a Christian as well? And so one of the things that I was thinking about is like maybe this is similar to kind of when rap was hot on the scene. It still is, never hasn't gone anywhere. But when then Christians started engaging in Christian rap, right? And there was questions about like, oh well, rap is usually around gangs, and it usually is about um, inappropriate things or breaking the law or murder and all these other things, and against the government and whatnot. And as a Christian steps into that space, there are a lot of questions like, can you do that? How do you like rap is naturally aggressive, and as Christians, we're called to be people of peace. And so, how do people of peace enter into space that's naturally aggressive, right? And yet, the Christian rap scene's blown up, and people have found a lot of joy and fruit and like help in it. So I think it's really cool that even in a space like the furry community, where there are a lot of questions and like onlookers who are like not sure what it is about and suspect about it all, there is still yet Christ has his servants there reaching that community, and
Mhm.
Christ still penetrates even to that niche part of the community, and there's still conversations within the Christian furry community of the balance of being a child of God and being in the furry community and not losing sight of the more important one.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and I think it's an interesting balance too, because there can be this aspect of, like having fun too, right? I actually remember, so when I was at Anthrocon, me and a friend of mine, we did a bit of street evangelism there. And we actually did it in our fursuits. And I remember someone, 'cause we basically had a sign. We were just holding up a sign that said, "Are people inherently good?" And we invited people to, come up and, like state their case and stuff. And, most
Cool.
people said yeah. Most people said yes. So we were like, okay, why? Right?
Well, actually, you're
And
wrong. That's
yeah. And so, yeah, and that was interesting. And I remember someone came up to us, um, and someone came up to us and he was like, "So are you guys here like just to evangelize?" Or and we were like, "No, no, like we're here to have fun too. Like we're here like we love this hobby as much as like everyone else here. We're here to have fun. We're here to enjoy ourselves. But, obviously as Christians, we also have a charge to spread the gospel. And it's what better opportunity to do that, right? Especially in this like, big party
Mm.
where this big party where everyone is gathering and stuff. And so, yeah, I think it's like again, it's like it's a balance that you have to, and I think that comes with time, and I think that comes with maturity, which is again why I always say to people, it's like, can you do this? It's not a straight yes or no. It's
Mm.
a like, do you have the spiritual maturity
Mm.
to handle this? And do you have the spiritual knowledge to defend yourself against all of the stuff that you are going to be faced with if you go into this community? Like, you are going to be faced with stuff that opposes your faith, and so you have to be solidly grounded in your faith so that you know how to like how to not engage with that stuff and how to differentiate yourself. Because I always say, like, we are going like I always say, as Christian furries, we're going to stand out all the more by not engaging with stuff that goes against the Bible.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Makes a
Gary,
lot of
any
sense.
questions?
Yeah. So as someone maybe listening to this, they might be like, wow, like a lot of the stigma I had believed around like what it is to be a furry is kind of fading away a little bit for me, and I'm understanding it in a new light, and I'm kind of interested in it. What should that person know as like the warnings for someone who's in the furry community of like how to enter it, be a part of it, understand it in a healthy way? Like, what are they going to encounter that could be some of the like slippery slopes, like bad places on the internet to go? How can
Right.
they find people in a safe way? Because I think that's a lot of parents' concerns for their kids as well. Of like, if I let my kid do this, how do I know they're going to be safe and that kind of stuff? You know what I mean?
Right. Okay, well, the first thing I would say is that actually this is interesting. The first thing I would say is that I think that like if you're engaging in the furry hobby, like people should be at least 18 before
Mm,
they do it. Um, and there are a couple of reasons for that. And I think there's like very, very few exceptions. Like, for instance, like the person who made my suit actually, I think was 17 when she made it, and she was
mm,
already a furry for a decent bit of time. Um, but generally, I think that because it's like you're going to like inevitably you are going to encounter some stuff in the furry community that is like that is like perverse and stuff. Like you're gonna see I remember like you're gonna see at Anthrocon, you're gonna see fursuits and stuff that are like, for lack of a better word, they're very sexually perverse and they'll just be walking around, right? And so you have to be careful of that. And I think it's just better if if like people that are younger aren't exposed to that. And I think it's
Mm,
um also not even on the sexual thing, but the thing about fursuits also is that they aren't like, because mascot costumes are mass produced to be worn by pretty much anyone.
mm,
A fursuit is not. A fursuit is built specifically. So like when I got this, my maker said I have to like tons head measurements, arm measurements, wrist measurements, etc., because it is custom built for you. And so if you get one of these when you're like 15, 16, 17, you're gonna outgrow it.
mm,
And then that's just literal thousands of dollars wasted. And so I think that's like the first area of caution where I'd say, it's like I think that at the very least, if you're gonna like get into this thing, I would say I think it's wise to wait until you're at least 18. Now, like
mm,
again, there are some exceptions, like I definitely have met some people who I think, I've seen they are, like mature enough to handle this sort of thing. But I think that generally speaking, it's best to wait. Um, I also think that like, again, like if you want to the best thing that you could do in terms of like is find Christian furry communities. Find
mm,
people out there. Like I have a community, like I said, it's a growing place with about 300 people in it. There's there's a variety of different people there who are, willing to help guide and lead people. There are tons of other Christian furry servers. I think the most popular one is called the Christian Furry Fellowship. It's about what is it? We've reached I think that place has reached around 1,100 people now. So there is quite a bit of presence there. And find friends who are Christians that like are into this sort of thing that can help encourage you, and that can help steer you away from the more perverse things. Because I do think that like one of the things that I've very much learned as a Christian is that I think it's important to have your close friend circle be people that are Christians, and that goes especially so when you're in the furry fandom, because they can help steer you away from the other stuff. And like I'm not saying that like you can't be friends with non-Christians. I mean, obviously that's not the case. I mean, we're called to go and make disciples, and so we can and should go and make friends with non-Christians. But I think that in terms of that close friend circle, those people who you trust with like a lot of things, and trust for guidance and leadership, like that should be Christians. And that goes especially so um when you're in the furry space. So find those spaces, find those people who could help guide you along alongside that sort of thing. And don't just engage the other, I guess, in terms of like not engaging, I would say don't just engage every sort of fursuit maker that you see um that looks cool, that looks appealing and stuff. It's very easy to get caught up in this idea of, oh wow, this thing looks really, really good. I'm gonna go
mm,
like follow this, and then you realize like, oh, they do like this. Like one of the first things I look into whenever I'm looking up like, people who make fursuits, the first thing I do is I go and I look at their terms of service and I see what they it's like basically like can they just straight out like cancel something if I do this or if I do that or whatever and stuff. And so I think just like uh preparing yourself to not just blindly follow or blindly accept everything that you see, but actually going and thinking and questioning like, okay, is this good to engage in? Is this thing, is this endeavor good to engage in this context?
Yeah, it seems like it is a more of a not so much a can I do this or more of like a should you do this?
Yes.
And that's similar with um other parts of society as well. But one of the questions that always arises, I feel like in my mind after that statement of like it's a rather a should rather than a can, is in my mind I'm like, okay, if that's the case, then how what is the why even engage a little bit if that makes sense? And I don't
Yeah.
know the answer to this even like in other situations like for instance, like with any movie with any nudity in it, I just won't
Mm,
watch, right? Because
mhm.
I have a history that was a weakness in the past, and so in my mind, I'm like, there's, and it's just it could be a great movie, but it's like if it's going to have anything that is like that explicitly evil and ungodly and wrong, then it's like, well, why as a Christian would I even want to be around that, right? Like, what is the utility in that? And I have even questions about like any like affirming media I watch or anything that's like explicitly pushing a very affirming agenda. I have a problem watching. Where I'm like, should I even engage in this? Like I was watching, for example, like Modern Family, and I loved it. Like my wife and I were like binging Modern Family, loving it. And then we had a conversation, and we're like, well, yeah, like one of the main characters is a gay couple, and they are kind of like affirming this idea and this lifestyle. And I don't think that's a godly lifestyle. I wouldn't want to promote this lifestyle as a valid option for people to live because I think it's got problems. And so we decided like, okay, well, we're not going to watch it then. You know, we're just going to totally disengage, even though we feel like we're pretty spiritually mature and it wasn't causing us to stumble. It's just like, oh, but like, what's the utility? So I'm just thinking about like the conferences where there are adult content or things that could be seen, even if you're not like even if you're staying away from that. If people are wearing that and walking around, you're potentially going to see it. I would wonder if it's possible the Christian furry community start their own conference. You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly, like we've talked about that. I really wish there was one. I think that should be something to get started. And I think that like I also think that's a valid question because like to me, my mind goes back to I think it's like First Corinthians 10, where Paul is talking about, it's like not all you say I can do all things, but not all things are helpful. Not all things build up, right?
Mm.
And so this aspect of like why even bother? And I think for me, it was I remember being in the registration line for Anthocon, and this was my first time seeing a bunch of other furries. And I think the only like the sort of thought in my mind was just why do um and like I don't mean to like critique the church, I guess. I just mean to like this is just sort of an observation. But why do we as Christians think that there are people such as furries that are like, well, those people are too far gone for the gospel. We can't possibly reach them because they're too weird, they're too whatever and stuff. Like as I was just like looking at like seeing these people, just like talk and have a good time, I'm like, like these are just these are just people that are, like trying to enjoy something and stuff. And they're people who need the gospel as much as anyone else. And so part of it for me is the reason why I chose the name Soul is because Soul or part of it is music based, but also partly because Soul is Spanish for light. And I take that in light of what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. You are the light of the world,
Mm.
right? We're supposed to affect things around us. And so for me, part of me being in the fan base and stuff is for me to be that light And I think that, it doesn't have to be with me saying like, like a lot of the time I'll just wear like pretty overtly like Christian stuff and I'll wear all that stuff. It doesn't even have to be like that overt. It could just be like in the things that we in the way that we act or the things that we do and the thing that we say. Like I say a lot of the time, it's like refusing to engage in like those sexually deviant aspect of the fan base and stuff. That immediately will make you stand out
Mm-hmm.
because and that's what I want, right? I want to stand out because I want people to see, hey, like there's a Christian who could enjoy this stuff and also desire to spread the gospel, desire for people to be saved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the Bible didn't say, when but Jesus said in Mark to go, Jesus didn't say go and spread the gospel to the people that we deem are weird or the people that we want to spread the gospel to. He said go and spread the gospel to all creation, and
Mm-hmm.
that includes furries.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think it's great to look at what you're doing kind of through the lens of like a missional perspective of like, hey, like this is a fun hobby. Other people like it that aren't saved. I'm gonna go bring Christ to them. I think that's a
Mhm.
great thing that you're seeking to do, and I think looking at it like that's really helpful.
Exactly. And like I will also say that it's like there's not everyone like that I know shares this like missional perspective and stuff. Like some people again like some people just want to do it for fun. And I think like that's okay too, because especially in the vein of, I remember a while back I was reading the book of Ecclesiastes actually, and it's personally become one of my favorite books because it talks about this idea of enjoyment. And I think it says, I think it's in Ecclesiastes chapter 11 where it says, "Young man, rejoice in the days of your youth, walk in the sight of your eyes," or something like that. "But know that for all this, God will bring you into judgment." And so the book has this idea of, it's like there are a few verses in there that talk about this idea. It's like and like this is the teacher talking. He said, it's like, "I saw nothing better than for them to enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God." And so I think that there is a sense of, it's like you could just enjoy it. And if you're a Christian, then what I always like to say is that if the Holy Spirit that is in us as Christians is powerful enough to raise Jesus from the dead, then he is powerful enough to show himself through through whatever we do that is
Mm-hmm.
honoring to God as Christians. It's like my pastor once said this quote from Saint Augustine, which I love. And it was, "Love God and do whatever you want, for the soul trained in love to God will do nothing to offend the one who is beloved." And there's depth to that. Obviously, he's not saying that you could go and do whatever you want, right? Like do whatever you want without any care in the world, because that's exactly what the rich fool did. He was like, "Well, I'm gonna save up all this stuff and then I'm just gonna kick back and relax." And God said, like, "No, you idiot, you're gonna die tonight." So,
I like that
like,
translation.
yeah, but like it's not in that sense. It's in the sense of, if you truly love God and if you want to see his kingdom come, then enjoy his creation, enjoy what you have. And if he it's like if you are a Christian, if you have the Holy Spirit in you, then that is going to show, because if we're supposed to be salt and light, that will show through our actions and what we do.
Yeah, back to like
Uh,
the idea of like like the what should we even do it, right? Like, oh, if it's not a question of like can but should, and then the next question is like, well, if it's that type of question, should we even do it at all? I'm reminded of the idea of like going to a bar, right? For some people, that's not a good idea. For a Christian who used to be an alcoholic, don't go to a bar. For me,
Mm,
I'm gonna go to the bar and play pool. It's fun. I'm gonna have a
mm,
couple drinks with my friends and go home, right? And it's like I'm not tempted by alcohol. I don't even like if I've ever gotten drunk by accident, I've not enjoyed it. And so it's like the bar for me is a social gathering place where I can go play pool with my buddies and have a good time. And some
mhm,
people do need a sense of maturity for that. So if you look at it through that lens, then I think you're like it's the same thing, right? You're gonna go to the
mhm.
furrydom or furry con, and you're gonna engage in that community. You just got to have your wits about you and be the person that's not gonna be affected by it. And know if you are right. If you're gonna be affected by it,
mm.
then stay away. Just like the person who knows they're affected by alcohol should stay away from a bar.
Yeah, exactly. Like you need to know, and you need to know, like like where you should, where you shouldn't go, and stuff, and what to engage with, right? Like I think actually a lot of the time, when I was at Anthrocon with my friends, we were just chilling. Honestly, I was just chilling with my friends. We were just hanging out together, doing stuff, and a lot of the fun I had, honestly, was just me, just kind of messing around with my friends, like doing
Mm.
fun stuff. Because like obviously, it's like if you're in a silly mascot costume, you could just get away with being silly and doing that sort of stuff. And again, I think like the really big thing about the community is like find those people who you can not only not who you can not only like express yourself around and do this sort of thing, but also who are brothers and sisters in Christ, who are going to lead you in a good direction and who are going to help you with discernment and stuff, and not just people that are going to affirm you in everything that you do. Because I can tell you right now that it's like I've disagreed with my friends on certain things. I've done some things. I even recently, I remember I got in the Christian furry sphere. I got pretty angry at someone else, and I had like one of my friends had to call me out on that. He was like, "Hey, don't do that."
Mm.
um and so I think it's important to have these relationships and stuff to where not only can you just like be silly and goof off and stuff, but people who will also, you know, who have your best interest in mind, and who for like I always say this, who will tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. My last question, and we can talk about anything you want after that. If there's any other topics you want to get into, my last
Yeah.
question is: why do you think there are so many different, and especially like Christian faith communities that are interested in like being furries? Is it just that like furries are popular, and then people just congregate around a group they were already a part of, or do you think there's something deeper that's an intersection there?
I just think that, like people are realizing that it's just fun. Like it just like I said, it reminds me a lot like when I was, like really young on the playground, I loved playing Pokemon with my
Hmm.
friends. And so it's
Hmm.
almost this idea of like you have this, like I said, a lot of the time, like a convention is basically just like a giant stage where you could just perform and do all this stuff. And I think definitely the appeal to it is this idea of like, oh, like this is an art form. This is something that we
Hmm.
can, engage in and have fun with and see these things in a new light. And for me at least, um, it's allowed me to like not only see like animals and stuff in a new light, but it also has allowed me to see scripture in a new light.
Hmm.
Um, so like I said, like my personal persona is a deer. And there are a couple of passages in scripture that specifically mention deer that have been my favorites, or some of my favorites now. I think so. The first one is it's in Psalm 42, which says, "As the deer pants for streams of water, so longs my soul for you, O God."
Hmm.
And that entire psalm is just a psalm of lament about, it's like, why are you not here, God? My enemies taunt me day and night. Why are you not here? And then the psalm
Hmm.
ends with, "I will put my hope in God," which is a very sort of apt analogy for me, is especially because like I've struggled with depression and anxiety a lot, and
Hmm.
so that helps me a lot at that. And then there's also is a bit of an obscure one, but the book of Habakkuk, at the end of it, he says, "God makes my feet like the deer's, he makes me tread on my high places." And I think
Hmm.
that's incredibly meaningful and stuff too, because the entire book of Habakkuk is again Habakkuk saying, "God, why aren't you doing stuff? Why aren't you
Hmm.
here? Like you said you were gonna do all this stuff to the nations, but you're not doing it. You're just letting these people run away." And then God responds with, it's like, "I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. Like, don't worry about
Hmm.
it. I got it." And so then Habakkuk responds with, like, praise God, right? He puts me on my high places and stuff. And so I think like like there's like you said, there's a lot of different reasons why people might get into this sort of thing. They could just get into it for the acting thing. They could, like, for
Hmm.
instance, one of my friends I know um who got into this sort of thing. He isn't as much into it for the acting thing. I'll say like whenever he is in his like fursuit and stuff, he doesn't really like act, not in the sense that he isn't like not to say like I don't mean that to be like insulting that he isn't like an actor or anything, but like when he's in the suit, he is literally just being himself.
Hmm.
And that is extremely effective for him. He's a hilarious guy And so I think that like when he's just himself and when he's doing that sort of thing, it's like, and that's why he enjoys it. He doesn't even like or at least as far as I know, he's not into it into like the sort of like specifics of an animal as much as like me. But that's, it's like that's just where he's at. He just finds it fun. He just finds it fun to, like dress up and do this stuff and, travel and do all these different things. And so again, like, like there's a lot of different reasons why people might get into it. Um, but I think at the heart of it, it's very creative, and it's just a really cool art form. Like sometimes
Mm.
I just look at the suit that I have and I'm like, wow, like this took so much time and care to make and effort. Like it's an incredible art form, really, that can be used for, I think, a lot more good than people are currently using it for right now.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Is there
it's
any other
great.
areas that you'd want to hit that you think people listening, learning about furries, wondering if it's okay for Christians to be furries should know about, or you think we've covered them so far?
I think we covered like pretty much everything. I will say that like if you like I guess a bit of like a self plug, but like I know you guys have or I know one of you has seen it, but I did a whole documentary on Christian furries talking about mostly talking about the objections to it, and also talking about testimonies from people within the community and stuff. So if anyone's like curious about it or wants to get into it, I would highly recommend watching that,
Mm.
because it is basically just a big overview of, it's like, if you're a Christian, what do we need to avoid, what do we, and like to be prepared for the objections to it, because there are
Mm.
objections. And basically it was just me talking about, it's like the common objections that people see. I think like the three main ones that I covered were, people will say, it's like furries are inherently sexual, furries think they're animals, and if you're being a furry, you're associating with like sinners and stuff. And so like talking about those aspects and saying, okay, how do we as Christians handle this stuff?
They accuse
Mm.
Jesus of associating with sinners too. So,
Yep.
people say that, like, well, if we're trying to
Mm.
convert them, might be a fine way to associate.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah.
engaging in the sin, obviously.
Yep.
Mm. Well, I love it. Sounds good. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know you have a great platform for everybody out there. Wondering where they can follow you. Can you let them know what your Instagram is, or the Discord, anything like that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So my Instagram is Soul Silver, so SOL Silver _SC. I usually that's like more like fun, silly plays and stuff. I just kind of upload whatever.
Mm.
I also have a YouTube channel. It's just Solfege, or you could look up Solfege Silver. I'm hoping to upload there more in the future. And I also have a Discord server. It is called so this guy here, his name is Whistler, after Whistler in British Columbia.
Mm.
So I have a server named Whistler's Pass. So if you just type in discord.gg/Whistler's Pass, you'll get an invite to it. It's a Christian furry server with tons of different people that are more than willing to help people get started in that journey and stuff, and lots of a really good mod team, uh, and just generally a very good place to, like, if you're looking to get into it, very good place to get started. So if you want to join, again, discord.gg/Whistler's Pass, just type that in.
Perfect.
Great.
Well, thanks so much, Soul, for coming on. We really appreciate it. I'm
It's
sure a lot of people have questions from this episode. So we'd love to see you guys. If you have questions in the comments, let us know. We'll try to respond as well. And maybe we'll do a part 2 if we need to.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. Really enlightening, really helpful conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, it's my pleasure, honestly. I love to talk to people about this sort of thing. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
And then maybe we can send you a copy of this as well so you can share it on your end too.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
All right. All right, everybody. See you guys next week.
Shits.